Hello, everybody. Ella J here for a Wrestling Gal, and today I'm joined by one of Australia's fastest rising stars, Leah Lovegrove. How are you today?
Hey, I'm good, thanks.
I am
Just
so
woke up.
excited. Yeah, 11 a.m. for you on a Sunday morning. It's a start to your week, and you got a whole professional setup, which I don't see a lot from my guests. So we're vibing. We're already starting off very well, Leah. And obviously we'll hear to talk a lot about wrestling, but I would be remiss if I didn't start off with one of your favorite non-wrestling passions, that being music. I've noticed you're a big music enthusiast. You used to play the piano and the drums and the guitar yourself. You're also a big concert enthusiast. So I think we'll start general. What is your general music taste like?
It's very, very broad.
Okay.
So I love alternate rock and heavy metal is where I tend to gravitate towards, but I played classical clarinet growing up. My mum likes country, my dad likes 50s and 60s music, so it's a bit everywhere, but I gravitate towards alternative rock sort of music. So yeah.
Yeah, so like I mentioned, just going through all of your social media, I know you've played the piano. You said you've played the clarinet. I've seen you play the drums, guitar. Is there any other instruments that I am missing on here?
The bass.
Bass, yes.
And I used to do vocal training. I used to sing,
Oh,
but
okay.
I've been to too many concerts that I yelled too much and I got vocal nodules in my voice. So I can never be a professional singer anymore. So
Yeah. You know what? At least you were having fun, during those
yeah.
concerts and all of that. I'm so curious with you're so musically inclined. Were your parents very heavily involved in music, or where did the interest in music kind of start for you?
So my mum and dad ran a karaoke business when I was a kid. So I'd spend a lot of my weekends sleeping underneath the little booth that they had set up on stage. Because my mum would sing and then let other people sing
Yeah.
karaoke. It was like a hire out thing. And she always wanted to be a singer. So she's Filipino and all they do over there is just sing karaoke every Sunday. So I sort of got that inspiration from her. Wanted to do music my whole life. And when COVID hit, I was like, oh, music sort of died off. I don't know what to do. So it's sort of when wrestling came into things.
Yeah, I'm so curious exactly where did this transition came for you. We'll get to more wrestling in a minute. But where did this transition from music to wrestling is a big pivot. And I don't know if you've had like an athletic, obviously very musically inclined. Did you have an athletic background as well? Or how did this pivot to wrestling kind of come together for you?
I've always been like massively involved in sports growing up
Okay.
too, because I'm from country South Australia and there's
Yeah.
not much to do there other than sports. So I did what netball, basketball, gymnastics, athletics like track and field, tennis. I think I did swimming at one point, but I did like all sorts of everything. And when I moved to Adelaide, I didn't do any sports. I was sort of lacking that in my life. I like always did it. And then moving into the big city, I just didn't have anything. I didn't go to the gym for the longest time either. So I was just missing that in my life. So I think wrestling came at the right time and really filled that hole that I had missing. So yeah.
How did wrestling exactly come into your life? Obviously, it was very opportunistic, as you're trying to fill a void, but how did you decide specifically on that, or did it kind of happen by chance?
It was really funny because I always liked wrestling growing up, but I never
Yeah.
paid too much attention to it. My ex-boyfriend, Jake, was like massive wrestling fan. He would fall like I would fall asleep to him watching it on TV because the time zones are funny. And he would just always go on about wrestling. I never understood it, didn't try to understand it. And then just one day I got bored and I sat down and watched it with him. I was like, oh, this is really cool, actually. And the more and more I watched it and he talked about it and he started mentioning Rhea Ripley because she's from Adelaide and he had seen her wrestling at Riot City before she moved to WWE. And I was like, that's so cool. Like someone my age can just wrestle, like can just do that and go to WWE. Like I might as well give it a shot. It was more of a curious, like, oh, if she can do it, maybe I could. So yeah, and I fell in love with it. It's just so good.
Yeah, Rhea's had a heck of a tear. Obviously, very sad right now. She's out injured, but heck of a run that she's had this last year. I know Io Sky, you've said is your all-time favorite now. She is one of my very much all-time favorites too, as well. So obviously, I assume your exposure through Io came through WWE as well. Maybe you've watched some Stardom in Japan stuff. But what about Io Sky slash Io Shirai really captivated you about her?
I didn't see much Japanese wrestling before I got into wrestling. So when I like tuned into WWE and saw what she was doing on NXT, I just thought it was so cool. And the way she wrestled, I didn't really realize that there was a difference between Japanese wrestling and Western wrestling, but the fact that she had incorporated like lucha stuff because Rey Mysterio is her favorite wrestler. And I really liked him growing up as well. Like I would say he was my favorite wrestler as a kid. Um, the fact that she had all these different elements, and I just thought it was so captivating. Like I just was so fascinated by it. It was so different compared to everyone else. And yeah, and I love Poppy. And the fact she like came out to Poppy once, I was like, yeah, she's got me sold.
Yeah, it's so beautiful in that crossover between two of your favorite things, music and professional wrestling. So kind of blurring those together. I'm so curious if, say, there's an unlimited budget, if you could have any band or artist create a custom theme slash entrance song for you, who would it be and what would the vibes and kind of sound be like?
I think for anyone who knows me, that's pretty obvious, but it would be Nothing But
But
Thieves. They are
thieves. Okay.
yeah,
Hmm.
my all-time favorite band, and it would be very up-tempo, really fast and exciting and vibrant, I think. Yeah, for some reason, I gravitate towards really fast music, like up-tempo music. I guess I'm an excitable person that I like freaking out and like banging my head and being weird.
And taking shoeies on stage with them.
Yes.
I need you to tell me. Obviously, I know you have seen them. Okay, I'm sure that you're such a big fan. You've keeping a tally. How many concerts are you at right now for Nothing But Thieves
um,
attended?
33.
That's amazing. I know some of them were in Europe, which we'll get to in a second, but going back to last year, you got to go on stage and got to do a shoey on stage with them. So how did that come together? And tell us about that experience. That is like the coolest thing, honestly.
That's a really long story actually, because it started in 2018. Um and this is a long story, but I
Okay.
wanted them to do a shoey in Australia back then, and I made a really shitty sign that was just scribbled on shoey, and I didn't hold it up at their gig. And I managed to go out drinking with them, and I found it in my pocket, and I was like, "Oh my god!" And we were all really drunk, and I just held it in the guitarist's face, and he was like, "Oh, we should do one." So we all drunkenly like did one, and then I went to London that same year and did a shoey with them there, and it just became an ongoing thing that I was a dumb Australian who liked doing shoeies, which is fine. It's funny. um, so when they came back last year, it was like 4 years since I'd seen them. I made up this big sign for them to do a shoey, and they were like, "Nah, we're not doing it." Went to the next gig, and the bassist did one. So the next gig, I bullied the guitarist, and he did one on stage. And then they had a discussion, apparently, that they didn't want to do one at the last gig. And they're like, who's gonna do one? Like, she's gonna bully us, she's gonna make us do a shoey. And the guitarist was like, why don't we just pull her up on stage and do one? If we don't want to do one, we'll get her up on stage. So they pulled me up on stage in Sydney in front of like 3,500 people, and I did a shoey, which was wild. Like I never thought that was going to happen, but yeah, it was a lot of people.
What a cool moment, getting to do that. And obviously, you mentioned obviously London. You were in Ireland, the UK, Amsterdam 5 years now. 5 years ago now, at this point, you traveled halfway across the world to see them. But you also said too that it was a liberating and self-defining experience. So, music aside, can you tell us more about the significance of that trip across Europe and what specifically you got out of it?
I was really lost in my life at that point. I dropped out of uni. Always wanted to be in music, but I just like the music course I was doing at uni wasn't really fulfilling, and I didn't think I was going to get anything out of it. So when I found Nothing But Thieves and traveled for them, it was just meeting people over the internet, like over Twitter, and all these friends who are just lovely people, and getting to see the world and experiencing the world outside of the bubble that is Australia, which is like so far from anything. It was just wild, and especially with like my parents were quite controlling parents, had me in a little bubble as well. I'd never got to experience things for myself, so the fact that I was just doing all these things, seeing all these places, meeting people, it was just so like fulfilling. I felt so grateful, and like there's a whole world out there, and I just love traveling and meeting people and friends, and it's so fun, and it becomes very addictive.
Yeah, music like wrestling, I feel like can really bring people and connect people together. You're all bonding, but you also are exploring, new territory and stuff like that. So, exploration wise, you're across Ireland, you're across England, you're across Amsterdam, the Netherlands. Exploration wise, what aspects of the UK and the Netherlands and their culture really stood out to you that you remember? It's like half a decade ago at this point. But what stood out to you?
um They're very relaxed in Amsterdam, like in the Netherlands, with like marijuana and stuff being legalized. That's so different to here. It's just, yeah, they're very chill people. In London, all I can remember is it being just really cold, like unlike anything in Australia. And then you go down into the tube and it's boiling hot. It's just nothing I've ever experienced. And like their buildings keep everything really warm, and but the culture is not much different, I would say. I think it's just more of a mindset. Like people in Australia, they're quite chill and very open, but they can be very rude. But that's just my experience
So can
working on like,
Americans as very much as well can attest to that as well. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I feel like most Western cultures would be similar in that regard, I think. But yeah. um, it's just, yeah, the main difference was the sights, like the actual landscape of the land, and um the weather. That was just the biggest shock for me. I'm not good with cold weather.
Well, yeah, especially, I mean, travel aside, you've spent most of your life in Australia, I assume, so it's inherently going to be a warmer temperature, I feel like all year round. Now, this is probably affected. What months were you in London and Europe?
um November and
Yeah.
just the tail end of December. So it was really
So
cold.
yeah, it's the fall into winter. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. And then
you
in
know.
Australia, it's basically summer. By the time it
Yeah.
hits that point, it's really hot already. So yeah, it was a big shock getting on the plane really hot, getting off and being like, I'm freezing. Yeah,
Yeah,
nothing I've experienced before.
Sounds like weather aside, it sounds like you had a lot of fun, a string of concerts while also getting to travel, new sites. That's like a dream for a lot of people. And obviously, you're getting to travel a lot for wrestling as well, But to kind of go back to the music, your childhood a little bit, like we mentioned, you played like so many different instruments growing up: guitar, piano, clarinet, bass. Were you in a band at all on this, or what was your motivation for playing all these instruments? I'm so curious.
I wanted to be in a band, but I never
Okay.
started a band, or I was never in a band. I was in school bands, like ones that we just made for like, oh,
Yeah.
we're we all like get taught by the same teacher. Let's make a like a super band and play at a concert, like the end of year concert. But I was never in a band. I just never thought I was good enough, which is really sad. But like, I feel like I was sort of like a jack of all trades in a way because I focused too much on everything that I never got to be good at one thing really specifically. So yeah, like everyone was better at drums or guitar or singing. And the one thing I was good at was clarinet. And you can't really put that in a rock band. I mean, you probably could,
You could.
but yeah, I played classical clarinet. It's a bit different. Yeah, so I was never in a band, so that made me really sad growing up, but that's okay.
Before you found wrestling, was your childhood dream kind of music related? Or when you think back to your younger self, what did your younger self envision older Leah doing when she got older?
Oh, definitely being a Taylor Swift. Yeah, not so much a pop musician, but
Yeah.
just being like Taylor Swift, 100%. That was like the big dream growing up. And now I think about it and I'm just like, oh, she sings in front of so many people. That is terrifying.
Yeah, especially I feel like you have it's kind of built into, it takes time. I totally get the whole like stage fright, public speaking thing. Even I'm still like, everybody has that, I feel like. But I feel like you got the music talents down and it's kind of in your blood at this point, I feel like. So you have a good solid foundation should you ever kind of want to go back to it. I feel like you could pull it off, Leah.
Oh, thank you. I might give it a crack. I might as well.
Maybe. Start small, not like 50,000, whatever, how many thousand it is. Start small, and just like wrestling, gradually build your way through, It's pretty,
Mm.
it's a journey, as they say, But with your parents having a background in the karaoke business, I have to ask, and maybe it'll be from Nothing But Thieves. What is your, I'll say, top three go-to karaoke songs?
Oh, okay. Left Outside Alone by Anastasia. That is an absolute banger. And I've been trying to get Istria, Punch Drunk Istria, to sing it with me. Just randomly for the longest time, but he hasn't yet. So that's a big goal of mine. um ah Top three. I've only got that top one. um Maybe a Celine Dion song. I'm not sure what one, but she's like a
Hmm.
classic, classic karaoke, like especially if you walk into a Filipino household, always singing Celine Dion. Um, and I would say this is a bit of a oddball, but "Thanks for the Memories" by Fallout Boy. I used to like lip sync that in my bedroom growing up, just like pretend I was singing it in front of
Yeah,
an audience. Yeah. So those three, I would
that's a
say.
really great song. Now, are you still a fan of 5 Seconds of Summer?
Yes. Big time. Luke
So
Hemmings is just
I
mm.
know. So I was going to ask about that. It's I also was on Twitter a decade ago. I was more of a one on the One Direction sides of things though. But Five Sauce was always. I saw the fandoms; they kind of intertwined a lot. Did you ever get that phone call from Luke Hemmings that you missed?
Oh my god. That's funny that you know about that. No, I didn't. I don't understand how like I'm lucky enough to meet Nothing But Thieves countless times, but someone else I've never brushed, never like it's insane. I just yeah, Luke Hemmings doesn't know that I exist and it makes me sad.
Now, was this because again, all bands did different things. Was this a contest type thing, or how did they end up getting your number? And then, like, were they mass calling fans? Like, I'm so curious to know the story behind this.
um, so it's really wild because my friends from Port Lincoln, they flew over to Adelaide and they've seen Five Sauce a lot more than me.
Yeah.
They're a lot more involved with them. And they just happened to be like find them in Adelaide and they were sitting at a cafe together, which is wild to think
Oh
now.
my
But
god.
yeah. And then Luke Hemmings was just, I'm just going to call one of your friends and was going through her phone and started calling me. I had the shittest phone back then. And if I even picked up a phone call, the battery would go dead. So I saw that my friend was calling me, and I was like straightening my hair, and I was like, nah, I'm not gonna pick that up. Like, my phone's gonna go flat. And it was Luke Hemmings on the other side, because she messaged me later being like, why did you not pick up that phone? That was Luke Hemmings. I was like, well, it was under your name. Like, how was I supposed to know? And she was like, I'm not joking you. And she showed me like videos of them, like of Luke calling, and I was like, oh no. I could have spoke to Luke Hemmings, but yeah.
This is 2014 for the record, by the way, people, one day, someday, it's got to be rectified someday. You've traveled the world with, Nothing But Thieves. Five Sauce, you can come through too as well. Come on, Luke. My gosh, I can't
Please.
imagine. I would probably feel the same way you did, knowing my luck, but fingers crossed, never say never. You're kind of a concert connoisseur at this point, so maybe they'll be touring, with one of your other favorite bands. They'll come to Australia, and maybe you'll have a second chance. I hope so anyway.
Thank you. I hope so too.
Now, shifting into wrestling, obviously, Wrestle Rampage is huge in your career. I believe you made your official debut after 18 months of training in January of 2023, if that sounds correct.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, and obviously you did a lot of training alongside Damian Slater. You've trained so many times with him as well, very influential on your career. So what are some things that you've specifically learned or taken away through your training with Damian and also Wrestle Rampage?
Oh, there's so many good things. It's it's so hard because there are so many things that my brain just goes, I forget about everything as soon as I'm put on the spot. But I feel like the biggest thing that Rampage and Slats has like taught me is that wrestling owes you nothing. Um, I honestly believe in that too. Like, the instant you start believing wrestling owes you something, you can get really bitter about things. Like, you expect things, like you expect an opportunity, but it doesn't. No one deserves anything. I don't know. I really can't explain it, but I do believe in that saying. And I've seen it happen in front of me to past wrestlers, where they expect things and then they get bitter and then they quit. And it's like, if you didn't have that expectation in the first place, you probably wouldn't get that mindset and get so negative about things. So yeah, you just be very grateful for wrestling, that the fact that we're doing it in the first place, I think, is a good way to look at it. So
Yeah, I feel like that's especially such an important mindset to have, especially so early on in your career, because I feel like starting out, you maybe, you set the bar, set your expectations really, really high, but kind of being more realistic too, and also grateful and kind of humble starting out, I feel like is going to be nothing but beneficial in the long run, especially too. So you don't get, because that can be discouraged if you have high expectations, that can really be discouraging, especially early on when you're trying to find your footing and all of that. Is that something that is you've adjusted to quite quickly, or has that been something that you've kind of had to not trial and error, just kind of, I guess live through experience to gravitate towards that?
I think because I sort of I'm involved in the music industry too a little bit. It's the music industry and the wrestling industry are very similar, like especially in the way that you're like an independent wrestler, independent bands playing gigs and stuff. It's very similar. Like, as soon as bands start expecting that stuff as well, like expecting a gig, expecting some sort of like, well, money is a different thing, but like expecting opportunities at festivals and things like that, it's the same. They can get bitter, and then they'll have internal fights in bands and things like that happen quite frequently. So yeah, it was just a quick transition over the music industry into the wrestling industry, being like, oh, I've seen this before. Like, that makes a lot of sense. So
Yeah, yeah, wrestling is very performative. It's also a part of the entertainment business too, as well. So yeah, that's kind of good that you have that background already, and your expectations are already inherently, lowered and kind of humbled. But you mentioned opportunities, and I feel like you had a really cool learning opportunity this year ahead of WWE Elimination Chamber in Perth. EPW held a training camp there with a lot of your fellow Aussie talents. Obviously, Damian Slater was also there. Tell us more about this experience.
Oh, it was very daunting, I would say. Like very, it was so cool, but if you couldn't tell, I get anxiety quite easily. So like as soon as I'm like, oh my God, like a really cool wrestler, I do actually freak out. Like I am true to my like my gimmick at the moment. I am a true fangirl. And yeah, people like Robbie Eagles made a little appearance and I was just like, oh my God. um and like quick rising stars like the Tuckman and Scott Green and like PPK, like all those like massive PWA names were there, and just like even the rising stars of Queensland were there. Like Little Mars, I'm very like close with her, but she's doing so well for herself, and like Eugenie and all those names. It's very daunting to be in the same room with all that talent, but it's so good because like it doesn't like if you're the shittest person in the room, the more you can take in from people who are like levels above. And I appreciate those moments because I don't find myself that experienced yet. So getting to learn from all those sorts of people, it's just a huge opportunity. And like, I'm so thankful for it. So yeah.
Yeah, so what are some of the things that, you're surrounded by a lot of vets and experienced wrestlers. What are some things that you learned either about yourself or about wrestling from this specific training camp?
I really learned to just believe in myself more. The straight away, if I don't, that's when things start going a bit lopsided when I'm wrestling. So like the more I'm just relaxed and staying true to myself and just trusting my gut, that's when things start to be a lot more natural and it connects with the audience a lot more. It's just very genuine. The instant I'm not being genuine, it just doesn't connect and there's no emotional journey or, with the fans or anyone who's watching. So yeah, that's like a big thing that I learned, just to be true to myself.
I feel like that's so hard too because obviously, in wrestling, your job is to kind of, entertain and sometimes they say you can crank it up to, yourself to 11 or whatever. But I feel like most wrestlers have kind of unique and kind of not over the top, larger than life personas as what it is. And, creating and crafting that, especially so early on in your career, is probably a big challenge because it's a big part of your identity. You mentioned your gimmick and your persona, so I don't know. Obviously, I feel like this early on, you're probably not 100% certain. You're always trying to probably sharpen up and fine tune it. Tell us about the process of shaping your identity and developing your character so far and kind of who you think Leah is right now.
Um, that's a very difficult question because I'm still fleshing it out because I just want it to be as true to Leah Lovegrove, the person,
Yeah.
as possible. Like, because the closer I find it's me, the easier people connect and I can just be myself and um, which I guess isn't I don't know how many wrestlers out there are just themselves and it
Yeah.
works that way. Maybe not even John Cena. I don't know. But um, yeah, it's just I want to be like a positive, relatable fangirl that people can relate to because all the fans of wrestling that are there are fans of wrestling. They can relate to being a fangirl, fanboy. I just want to connect with people that way. Like I've found with my like experience with life, I love connecting with people and getting to talk about their passions and how they've found whether it's wrestling or nothing but thieves, like music related things. I love hearing people's stories and connecting with people. So that's what I want Leah Lovegrove to be, just a someone that people can relate to and just like gravitate towards to connect to and like be like, yeah, I understand that. So yeah, that's what I want.
Yeah, like I said, especially so or the beautiful thing though is, on indie wrestling, you kind of have that creative freedom to to experiment. Some things work, some don't, but that's kind of the beauty of where you're at is you have this creative freedom to be able to experiment, try new things. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. If it does, you can implement it, and try it out with different crowds, see what reaction it gets. So I feel like that's another benefit of indie wrestling. You're still trying to find your footing, but you have the space to be able to experiment through that journey while you're not really finding yourself. It's just more fine tuning it. I feel like
Mm.
who you are, you're a very positive person and you kind of have a general idea of what you want to be. And now it's just, finding the right way to express that. And obviously each crowd is different and all of that and depending on your face heel. But I feel like you got a good foundation for yourself so far.
Thank you.
I'm curious too. Obviously, your presentation is a big part of it too. You're very maybe it comes a little bit from your music influence, that metal. You're very drawn towards the black gear. Maybe that's a little bit of inspo for it. But tell us about the general sources of inspiration that you look to when you're crafting or envisioning your ring gear designs.
Um, so the one that I've got, and the only one that I've debuted yet, was very. I wanted it to look sporty and be comfortable.
Yeah.
I'm like wearing short tights or anything like that. I can envision me being very uncomfortable. So I wanted pants, and I got this bra set that was really comfortable at the gym, and I was like, I'm just gonna base it around that. I'm just going to have something that I can pull over. And so that was the idea of the shape of the design, but the actual design itself. I'm a big anime fan, and a lot of anime that I watch is drawn towards like the blacks and the reds and the whites, that sort of aspect and that color theme. And Wrestle Rampage's color theme is black, red,
Yeah.
black, red, white. Yeah, black, red, white. So I was just like, oh, that's really cool. So like I really like that color theme. I was like, oh, if I'm like representing Rampage, I want to put that color in there. And also like Japanese wrestling, like Io Shirai, she had I think it was like a one piece, but it sort of looked like a two piece. The one where it was like,
Where it's like cut in the middle. There's a cutout in the middle. In the
yeah, but
front,
it
like,
was
you
like
talking about
long
her green
tights.
and black ones where
Yeah,
yeah, I know which one you're talking about.
on
It looks like
NXT.
it's yeah, it's like a I think it's a one piece, but it's like there's a cutout in the middle. She's wearing, like, kind of long pants and a sleeveless top. I think you're
Yeah.
talking about the green and black one.
Yeah, yeah, the one with the, like, lots of eyelets that would always break.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I really liked that. I thought that looked really cool, and I was like, "Oh, like, I want something similar, but not too similar," so that was a big inspiration as well, so, yeah, I just, like those sorts of color themes and then that sort of style, and I was just like, mash it all together. I was, sitting in my living room being like, shit, I need to create ring gear like now. I need to have ring gear before my debut. I haven't thought of it. And I just did up a quick design and I was like, that'll do. And then I gave it to Pinfalls and Needles, Ash, and they just did it up. Like they were like, this is so cool. Like, how is this your first design? Like, I haven't seen something intricate like that for a first design. I was like, oh, I don't know. I just did it up quickly. Like I had no idea what I was doing really. So yeah.
You mentioned obviously you're taking a lot of inspo from anime as well, and also obviously Io Sky, Io Shirai. Without giving too much away, because I'm sure you're thinking about future gears, can you tell us what's running through your head kind of right now as potential future gears and what they may look like or where the source of inspo might lay from?
Um future gears, right. So I do have one in mind, and um my favorite Nothing But Thieves album. It's sort of gonna be inspired by that. So I can't remember the art form, but it's where something ceramic cracks and you piece it together with gold. That sort of is where the inspiration is going to come from. So yeah,
What's the name of
uh,
this album, just for clarification?
Broken Machine.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I feel like that can go well. I'm excited to see once you debut that, once that comes together, what it looks like, because it's, again, it's kind of tying in, it's tying into who Leah is outside, music, bringing it to life, and into wrestling, which I think is so cool that, like I said, you have this creative freedom to do that. So I'm looking forward to whenever you debut that. And, kind of, speaking on the positive train, as you're looking back on your career thus far, you're about a year and a half since your debut. Is there a particular performance of yours that stands out to you as one that you're particularly proud of, and why?
Um, I had a match against Wham Bam Bellows in October last year, with Vicky Void ringside, and that one was really touching to me because I was at a very low point in my life. I had a relationship breakup, and a really close friend of mine passed away in the same, like basically the same day. And I had to wrestle that weekend, so I was very shocked, and I didn't think I could wrestle. And going out there, I was like, "Oh my god, I can't remember everything. I'm so stressed out." And I got out there, and it just like my brain just went silent, and I was like, "Oh, okay, I can do this." And it was by far my favorite match I've had so far. Like, and that was in like dedication to Leroy. He was a customer at my work who would come in
86
every
years
day.
old. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just so lovely. And yeah, the fact that that was my favorite match and still is my favorite match, I just, yeah, it's close to my heart, that one. And I know Wham Bam Bellows said that that's one of his favorite matches in a long time as well. So yeah, it's very touching for me to have that moment. So yeah.
Yeah. And, as you're looking towards the future, final question, what are some of your personal and professional goals for the next year or two?
I would really like to wrestle interstate a lot more. I've got a booking in Queensland in just under a month, so that's very exciting. But yeah, I'd like to get around Australia a lot more and hopefully overseas. Japan is a big one, whether it's, I go there a lot or just one single match over there, it doesn't matter. I'd be grateful to get over there. Yeah, so and really get my gimmick to really refine my gimmick and get people excited about it is something that I'm hoping happens.
I feel like I actually have to close on this because it kind of just sums up everything. Obviously, you're a fan of a lot of music and professional wrestlers. We mentioned Io Sky as one, Rey Mysterio. You mentioned a lot of in the Aussie scene. Who else are you a fan of right now in the professional wrestling scene for you
Oh,
personally?
there is so many people. I love everyone really. Um, I honestly believe that Axe Massacre from Wrestle Rampage is being slept on massively. She trains so hard. She trains so hard, and her gear is so cool. She's buff as shit. She's jacked. Like, yeah, I love her so much as a person, as a wrestler. And like, I'm honestly surprised that she's just not blown up yet because she's just incredible. Like, oh, geez, sorry.
All
Yeah.
good.
um, that's locally, definitely. But yeah, she's so cool. As a person especially, like you get to know her and you're like, wow, like you could be everyone's friend. Like
You are the second Aussie in the last week and a half who I've had shout out X Massacre on their own. So I think that's a real testament to the work that Axe is doing. Is just even without even seeing Axe wrestle, just the look alone, I feel like will already reel you in. And Axe is still very fresh, but kind of like yourself, there's so much more room to grow, but the potential is there. The look, the presentation is there. There's so much great foundation. So I'm excited to see obviously your future acts as well. Hopefully Japan is obviously huge for everybody, and make your rounds around Australia as well. So, keep doing your thing, girl. I have nothing but high hopes for you. And before we let you go, please let the listeners know where they can find you on social media and support you.
Okay, so you can find me on Leah Lovegrove on basically everything. So Instagram, Twitter, it's Leah Lovegrove, but my handle is Nothing But Leah. Um, Facebook, mm, it's also Leah Lovegrove, but I will be a bit wary of who I add on there, just because that is my personal Facebook. But yeah, Leah Lovegrove on everything, even on Spotify if you want to have a look at my playlists. So yeah,
Well, Leah, thank you so much for chatting with me here today. I'm so glad we finally got to do this. It's been an absolute pleasure.
thank you so much.